Well, we've heard about the presence of God in about every musical genre we could think of tonight. And it fits into every one of those. Turns out that thinking about and reading about the presence of God is not a simple thing to look into. It is in one sense, and you've been hearing a lot about it tonight, but in other senses, it's all through the Bible. And so, first of all, even just talking about what do we mean when we say in his presence, the presence of God? I mean, I know what's meant by it by many people when we say, oh, I've been in the presence of God. We're talking about some kind of feeling we've had tonight. Maybe you say, yes, we've been in the presence of God tonight. But does that mean that we weren't on the drive-in? And some of you maybe weren't on the way in the drive-in. But what do we mean? Are we talking about a feeling, or are we talking about a truth? Well, the word presence itself means the state or fact of existing, occurring, or being present in a place or thing. The Latin word means to be at hand. And it turns out, as you study and look through the Bible from beginning to end, he's always been present. It's the problem is our consciousness of it. Take, for example, in the garden, Adam and Eve. God creates the beautiful garden, creates Adam, breathes life into his nostrils, builds Eve out of his side, and they walk with God in fellowship in the garden, perfect, unbroken. And then sin happens, and what happens after that? We see Adam and Eve hiding from the presence of God. It's exactly what the Bible says, those very words, hiding from the presence of God. Never happened before. They had clean, unbroken fellowship with God until sin entered, and then they felt compelled to hide from God. They heard him in the garden, and they were afraid. And so they hid from God. They made, the whole fig leaf thing, and they hid from God. And it was God that came and said, Adam, where are you? It was God that was looking for them. They weren't looking for God. They were looking to get away from God. But God was looking for them. You can fast forward to the time of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. God creates a little slice of heaven on earth called the tabernacle, and under very certain conditions and very certain ways, people can enter into his presence. There, the mercy seat, the cherubim, the tabernacle, God's presence would be there to dwell with his people. And then you can fast forward to the New Testament, and we can talk about Jesus. In the person of Jesus, God came to be present with his people. That's what we celebrate at Christmas. Emmanuel, God with us. God was present. He walked with his disciples on earth, physically, tangibly, for 3 years. 12 disciples, they were present with him all the time, doing ministry together. And yet Judas, something was absent. And then you can fast forward, Jesus crucified, dies, buried, raises from the dead, and then ascends into heaven. There goes his presence. But that's not the end of the story. God pours out his Spirit, and now his presence is not just with us. For those that believe, his presence is actually more intimate than ever in us. That's the mystery of the church. Christ in us, the hope of glory. That's a mystery, that God would tabernacle not just in Jesus and not just with his people, but in us. So in a sense, those of us that are part of the church, God is present today on earth in the church. We are his body. He's present in the church by the power of his Spirit. And even on through eternity, isn't that what we hope for? That we will spend eternity where? In his presence. I don't want to spend eternity in outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. I mean, if God is love, and God is light, and God is truth, to spend eternity separated from him is to spend eternity separated from truth and love and light, where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. I think that one of the things when we talk about hell, we talk about that eternal separation from God. The biggest thing, I think, that will be the most painful thing at that time will be regret. Because tonight, we're telling you about the presence of God, that God has always been right so close to you. One of my favorite Psalms, there are so many passages that I pored over and looked at and thought about as I was preparing for tonight. And Psalm 139 just would not leave me alone. So that's what I'm going to read to you from. And I'm going to read this in the context of a world. Will you listen to the news? 2 people this past week, famous people, committed suicide. The CDC just did a research study about the rates of suicide and how much they've increased. Every state of the 50 states has seen an increase, a drastic increase in suicide from 1999. Some states as much as 50%. Huge increases in suicide. And all the while, where is God? We say, where is God? The question isn't where is God? The question is, where are we? You see, from the time you were born, God was there. Before you were born, God was there. God told Jeremiah, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. That picture can stay up as I read to you. Oh Lord, Psalm 139 says, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. He knows where you've been. He knows when you sit down. He knows when you get up. His knowledge of you is intimate and perfect. And he still loves you. Isn't that crazy? You understand my thoughts afar off. You comprehend my path, my lying down. You're acquainted with all of my ways. And he still loves us. For there's not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You've hedged me behind and before and laid your hand upon me. And as David writes this, as he comprehends the omnipresence of God, he says, such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's so high, I can't attain it. It's so magnificent. It's so incredible. It's hard to fathom. So he says, where can I go from your spirit? Or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I go out into outer space, have you seen the pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope? I mean, remarkable that God holds the universe in the span of his hand. That the nations are as a drop in a bucket. Read Isaiah 40. It's a great read. If I ascend into heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Hades or in the earth, behold, you're there. If I take the wings of the morning, if I hop onto the rays of the sun and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be as light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you, but the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. God is not worried when the lights get turned out. He's not scared of the boogeyman under the bed. God doesn't see with eyes like we see. He doesn't have the same type of eyes that we do. His eyes, for him, darkness and light doesn't matter. So you think in the darkness you're alone. God says, I'm with you in the darkness. Now this is the part that I love. As if I didn't love the rest, but I do. But I especially love this part. God says to you and to me, my knowledge of you is so intimate. I'm so near to you that I formed your inward parts. That David says, God, you covered me in my mother's womb. You wove me together in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth, that hidden place in your mother's womb when you were just a little teeny tiny multi-cell embryo. God was there, knitting you together. No human eyes were watching. No human hands were involved. And here you sit, completely apart from the eye or the involvement of anybody taking part. God alone knit you together. And so I pulled these pictures up so you could just see and appreciate. I forget what the age is of that picture. I wish I could remember, but I can't. Amazing to see, even at that young fetal age, all of the pieces and parts coming together. You skillfully wrought me like needlework, like embroidery. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they all were written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet were none of them. God has been there for you from before you were born. He's been watching you all these days, and he knows when the last of your days will be. And so tonight, we don't know I don't know when the last of my days is going to be. You don't know when the last of your days is going to be. God knows, and so day after day, he reaches out. Day after day, he cries out. You see, God has always been near. It's our consciousness of the invisible hand of God that doesn't become visible to us, doesn't become real to us until we accept him. But I would suggest that having talked to people for so long about God, the downtown mall, Charlottesville, I'll ask people, has there ever been a time in your life when you just thought that was it? You were in trouble, a life and death situation, a difficult problem, an issue that you had, a circumstance, and you know that you shouldn't have survived. And yet you also know that there was a hand involved that rescued you, that stepped in, some kind of divine intervention. How many of you would say, I know that happened to me? I've never met someone that says, nah, it never happened. Everybody I've talked to says, I know there was a time in my life where some invisible force was at work and rescuing me and calling to me and ministering to me and saving me and from that, whatever that situation was. And I say it, and I know it myself. Friends, that's the hand of God. You see, the relationship's been broken from the time of the garden. All of us born together with Adam, separated from God. This is why we love Jesus, because he's the one that bridged the gap. Because some of you know the pain of a broken relationship, right? It's a family member, it's a child, it's someone who you're on the outs with. There was some kind of confusion, there was a disagreement, an argument, there's bitternesses, there's grudges, and you haven't talked in years. And you would love, and you've been trying to reach out. You've been trying to reconcile, and they just won't have it. And you know the pain of that. Any of you know the pain of that? You know how that feels. It's painful. And to God, it's painful too. Because there's been this problem, this disruption in the brokenness of the relationship, and God's heart is broken because he loves his people. And so he did the unthinkable. He came himself to make a way by forgiving your sins, by cleansing you from all of your sin, so that you as a sinful, unclean person could be deemed clean and washed and righteous and then be welcomed into the presence of God. The Father, the prodigal son, who left who? The Father was always there waiting. It was the Son who ran away. And then when he came to himself, what did he do? He went back home. And the Father said, okay, now that you're back, we got to have a talk. He didn't say that, did he? Welcomed him, no questions asked. My son, who was dead, is now alive. He's been gone, but now he's home. So the poster for the concert was the picture of the hand reaching up. And so we thought, as we prayed about this and discussed it, we thought we'd give a bookend to this. So I want to read to you, as we pull up the last slide, Isaiah 58:9 says, "Then you shall cry, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry, and he will say, here I am." Romans chapter 10 tells us that God is not far off, that you have to go on some valiant venture to find him. You don't have to do some miraculous feat to earn him. The word is right here tonight. It's been in song, it's in the preaching, and God is saying to you, be reconciled to me. His hand has already been reaching down, his nail-pierced hand, so that you could have fellowship with God again. Has been reaching down. And in the context of fasting, Isaiah 58:9, in the context of saying, you know what, I want to cry out to God. I just need God. I need a change. I need something different. I've been trying. I've been working. I've been in my own strength, in my own power, and things are just getting worse and falling apart. And you're saying, where is God? And God is saying, where are you? I can't help you if you won't come to me. I can't rescue you if you're feeding the pigs like the prodigal son and you won't be near me. Isaiah 58:9 promises us that when you call, he'll answer. And when you cry, he'll say, here I am. That's all. You just have to humble yourself. And you'll find, as Michael Card said, you'll be guided by a hand you cannot hold. Peter writes about, we love the one who we haven't seen. We don't have the opportunity to have walked with him physically, personally, but we walk with him in the Spirit when our hearts are close to his will. The Apostle Paul, it was so real to the Apostle Paul that in the book of, I believe it's 2 Timothy, he talks about being on trial, and he said, when I was on trial, no one stood with me. He said, may the Lord not hold it against them, but the Lord, he stood with me. He was with me. That's not something you conjure up. That's real. That's a real sense of the presence of God, even when you're going through hard things. So as we sing a closing song, I don't know what you want to do with all this. I don't know where all of you are. Some of you, man, you may be enjoying the presence of God right now. Just every day you get up in the morning, you read the Bible, you pray, you go, I know God is near me. I know by faith that he's near me. I sense his presence like the wind, you can't see the wind, but you know it's there because you feel its work. That's how it is for those of us that are spiritual. When you're born again, the Spirit of God, like the wind, working in your life, you know it. But all right. Howdy. All right. That's your cue to get into sync with God. So I don't know. I don't know where you are. I know me. There was years of my life I was not close to God. There we are again. Is that a cue? Are you trying to tell me something, Nick? Oh. I wasn't close to God. I wasn't. And I was alive, but far from God. And a day in my life, God showed up in my life. He called me back to himself. I answered the call. And here I am, 23 years later, still walking with him. And I hope to be walking with him until the day he calls me home. And then I hope to walk with him and live in his presence for the rest of eternity. So, as we sing this final song, it's listed on your sheet as an invitation song. And that means that Jesus is here, not just us. We're just ambassadors for God. We just plead on God's behalf. That's what 2 Corinthians 5 tells us. We are ambassadors. We just represent the living, miraculous, marvelous God. And we are here on his behalf to say to anyone in here who's not near to him, that today, tonight, in this place, on this date, you can be reconciled to God through the precious blood of Jesus Christ. So when you read an invitation song, recognize this is not the choir, this is not me, this is not Nick or Ann. This is God himself. He has appointed us to beg you to be reconciled. So are we standing? So as we stand, I don't know. Someday the real pastor is going to show up. If you've been moved by this, what you've heard, what you've seen, if you're moved in your heart, then we're going to do just that. We're going to invite you to be bold, to say, I need to come near to God, and the cross is right here, and you can come and you can kneel right here, and we'll pray with you. You can do business with God right here. No one's going to laugh at you. We're going to cheer for you and welcome you to the family. Everybody around you knows you need God. And so if you brought someone with you and you know they need God, elbow them now and say, hey, you need God. You need to go up there and pray and invite God into your life. So we'll be here, and maybe no one will come up, and that's fine, and we'll close, we'll go eat dessert. And that's okay. I don't get paid by the soul. But man, is it great to see, isn't it?